Today is Monday, February 17th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Marco Rubio is in Israel. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us directly, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We'd love to hear from you as we're here getting through the news of the cray each and every weekday. Bright and early, we're at it. Joining me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell. Billy, on The Focus, Jennie Allen's talking about a real-life miracle.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful seeing thousands of young people worshiping Jesus on a college campus. We'll get into what that looked like.
Yeah, we've been seeing that more lately, and I love it. You love to see it, so looking forward to the details on this one. And today's President's Day, and on the main thing, the attempted assassination changed how President Donald Trump views faith. So on this President's Day, we take a look at the faith of some of America's most notable presidents. That's coming up on today's main thing. Make sure you're subscribed to all of our CBN News podcasts. You can find the links to them in the description of this Quick Start podcast episode. And with that, we are going to head to the news in 90. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday, affirming that Hamas must be eradicated and emphasized the U.S.-Israeli alliance against Iran. Trump's plan for Gaza, which involves allowing civilians to leave while the U.S. helps rebuild, was also discussed, with Netanyahu claiming many Palestinians want to leave but are prevented by Hamas. At gunpoint, 3 hostages were released on Saturday: an American Israeli, a Russian Israeli, and an Argentinian Israeli, after being paraded through Gaza in a propaganda stunt before finally reuniting with their families. Trump had set a Sunday deadline for all hostages to be freed, but he stated he will leave final decisions to Israel while working closely with Netanyahu. And Patriarchy Hannah, the popular X account featuring a woman who supposedly championed the trad life, which is short for traditional life, deleted their account over the weekend as internet sleuths began questioning whether or not the person was real and if their family even existed. The person claimed to be a homeschooling mother of 14 and would often give advice on homeschooling and marriage instead. She apparently is someone named Jennifer Bays, who and the husband doesn't appear to exist, nor the children. Those are just some of today's top headlines. Check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And Billy, I'm covering the Patriarchy Hannah story here today. I found it interesting. So it's still developing. We'll see how it shakes out over the weekend. But that's according to these people who have been digging into this story. That's what they're supposedly finding. And I just think it's a stark warning to all the content we consume on the internet. You're following X accounts, and all it takes for somebody to create one of these things is to just turn it on. So trust but verify is the reminder that I think we'd all be wise to follow at this point, because this one appears to be falling apart. And a lot of people, a lot of prominent conservatives went on this account. They did interviews on their podcast, on this Patriarchy Hannah's podcast. And so, you know, there's so many deceptive things going on. Sin is easily entangles us in the sin of wanting to be notable and famous and make a name for yourself, can lead to people to do some crazy things. And it looks like, allegedly, in this case, that's what happened, as the person deleted their account. And as you look back on it, they were taking pictures, and you'd never see the faces of her family. Even if they were blurred, you'd never see that. You'd never see her face. It was always just animals in the background, or, you know, a hand doing something, those sorts of things. So just be careful out there. Sort of the moral of the story here.
Yeah, well, I think trust in general on the internet, it's a dangerous thing. Like, if you don't know the person, but it's kind of wild that an account, if this is all true, right, could be built up and all these things could be fake. I mean, this goes back to the whole catfishing thing, right? There's a show on MTV about catfishing. This has been an ongoing thing. And really the biggest lesson at the center of it is to be warned that You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know who you're communicating to. And I mean, you learn this in journalism school, and you learn it in life. You've got to verify, but it's really easy to emotionally get sucked into something and you don't verify and you don't know. But this is, I mean, again, if it's all true, it really is one of the most wild stories of a person being able to accomplish that.
And it's a symptom too of what we see of a larger problem, which is the quickness to platform people because they get an audience. And this person didn't even have a humongous audience. I think they were at like 50,000 followers or something like that, which is a solid following on X. Not nothing to sneeze at there, but not millions. But it just seems like as soon as someone gets a lot of followers, that person's getting platformed everywhere. Now we have to hear what this person has to say. And part of that is valid, right? If someone's getting that much notoriety, that means people are interested in what they're saying. So there's some truth to that, but it's easy to follow somebody on X. It doesn't mean you're devoted to them, right? It doesn't mean you believe everything they say. It just means you're getting a lot of notoriety. So I think there needs to potentially be a shift in internet culture and in culture at large, where we don't just automatically say, you know what, this person's got a lot of followers, let's just bring them out there and everything they say is the gospel truth. It just shouldn't be how it works. The old way, where we had the gatekeepers and you only had access to, elite media types and those sorts of things, that had its pitfalls as well. So it's really great that people can have a voice and they can just turn on their computers and create accounts and say things and speak truth and be able to do that. There's a lot of power and goodness in that as well, but there's also downsides, and I think this is one of them.
Yeah. Well, and, just making sure that we understand all the information that we're taking in. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. If you're seeing a statistic even on X or on some other platform, not just running with it, making sure it's a real statistic. I think we're so prone to also just run with information when we like something or agree with it. Mm-hmm. So there's that. But I think the point you just made too about platforming people, we're in this celebrity obsessed culture, and that carries over to social. So when somebody starts to get a platform and you like what they're talking about, again, you just kind of put your guard down and embrace it and accept it and elevate it. And we've got to be more discerning in general, I think, in our culture.
Yeah, 100% there, 100%. So we all need to do our due diligence on that one. All right, we're going to move over to the focus story now. Author and speaker Jennie Allen witnessed what she called a real-life miracle last week at the University of Kentucky. So what's going on here, Billy? What happened?
Yeah, we've seen this again and again and again, and Unite Us, which is the movement that Jennie Allen is a part of. JP Pokluda, lots of other people are a part of it too, but they go on these college campuses and have these incredible events. And so last Wednesday, Unite Us went to the University of Kentucky, the Rupp Arena, and they held they don't call it a revival. They basically hold a service, and the students at the school help organize it. And you had thousands of young people. She didn't give specific numbers, but we've seen numbers saying 7,000 to 8,000 young people showed up in this arena on this campus and praise the Lord. And so they talk about the gospel. Jennie and others share, and then there's music, and really just incredible. She said this was the 12th university that they had been to, and this week they'll go to the 13th university at Ohio State. And she said in every single case, it has been miraculous.
And so how did these young people sort of react to the gospel?
So you can see images, Jennie Allen has them, and we've got an interview with a few of those images. You can both watch our interview with Jennie and read about it. But you just see hordes of young people in praise and worship. But one of the things she said is that so many kids came forward, confessed sin, followed Jesus, and really just, it's not just this like, ho hum, they're getting together. I mean, they're cheering, they're confessing out loud, as she was saying, their sins. She said, it's unlike anything I've ever been bold enough to pray for until recently. So she said, like, it's exceeded anything she could have even said. God, can you make this happen? And that has left her and others really in shock as they just continue to show up and host these events.
So what about the baptisms? Did those happen too?
They did. She said, all over the stadium, right, you have these kids huddling together, crying, praying, holding one another. And then after the event, this has been the thing with these events that has sort of shocked people, is that the event ends and then all these young people want to get baptized. Like they've had such a moment that they're like, no, now we want to be baptized. And so she said they had 4 people baptizing young people for over an hour and a half because she didn't have the numbers again. She's like, I'm not a big numbers person, but it took an hour and a half with 4 people constantly baptizing to get through all the young people at the university who wanted to be baptized. So really pretty powerful.
Yeah, it certainly is. And look, this is the latest in sort of a domino effect that we've kind of been seeing. We've on college campuses. We saw it at Ohio State with the football team doing a lot there. Obviously, this started a couple of years ago. We've seen this trend that has been noted in Christian media by CBN and others, Asbury revival, and we're seeing a little surge here, right? And in many places, it's overwhelmingly a joy. This is something you want to celebrate. But you mentioned the thing about having a moment. Like we want to. It's a weird thing because I'm torn on it, right? Like if someone is feeling led to go commit their lives, that's great. At the same time, is it just one of those things that's like a spur of the moment and I'm doing it because everyone else is doing it? It's a weird thing because I wouldn't be like, no, we need to analyze here and decide if you're really saved or not. You know what I mean? It's a weird thing. Like when we look in scripture, what happens when someone hears the word and they want to be baptized, they just get baptized right away, right?
I think with all of this, going back to Asbury, one of the things, it's like you have 2 options in these situations, right? One is these kids never show up and never have this moment.
Right.
And the other is, and I'm talking on the side of the critique of this, the other side is they show up and they have this moment and some people say it was just this over emotional thing and maybe they didn't legitimately have this, whatever. Like, let's say that's the case. They're caught up in the emotion. That would seem better even in that moment to be caught up in the emotion than to never have it, because it may be 5 years later that these young people remember that, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes a defining moment for them, even if it was something that some people are like, oh, it was just this over emotional thing. Now, it seems for a lot of these kids to be very legitimate, but at the end of the day, it could just be one of those defining moments on a longer journey for some of them, I guess is the point.
Sure.
So
for sure. No, yeah. And I think that's a good spot to land, right? I just like thinking these things out and making sure, we're doing the right thing, like in these circumstances, at least for me, like if it were to happen in my neck of the woods. Right. And I'd be grateful for that, not criticizing it at all. Just saying that we need to be discerning. But at the same time, I'd be very slow to warn someone away from getting baptized. I mean, I think if someone's wanting to get baptized, I think, who am I to stand in the way, right? I'm not going to do that. Go ahead, get baptized, and we'll let God do the rest there. So I think it's great. I think it's great what's going on. And, you'll love to see it.
Absolutely. Yep. And they got to be discipled. It's not just this one-time event, right? So there's a lot of other factors, but I'm really curious to see how many more campuses they hit up and what happens next, because every time it's wild.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Good stuff there. Happy to see it. Glad you brought that report today to the podcast, Billy. And we're going to move over to the main thing now. And it's President's Day, and the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, caused President Trump to say, I believe in God, but I feel much more strongly about it now. And on this President's Day, we're looking at the faith of some of America's most notable presidents with Christian historian William Federer, who shares facts with CBN's Gary Lane about the faith of Washington, Lincoln, Roosevelt, FDR, JFK, and others. That's today's main thing.
President's Day 2025, a day for America to pay tribute to its presidents. Many U.S. presidents knew their limitations and honored the one who truly made America great. Most of the country's presidents were men of faith, who acknowledged not only the country, but also the God they served. Here with us is Christian historian William Federer. He's author of the book, Prayers and Presidents, Inspiring Faith from Leaders of the Past. Bill, it's good to talk with you again. So first, I've got to ask you about the current U.S. president, Donald Trump. Here's what he said about his faith after the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt.
Honestly, it changed something in me. I feel even stronger. I believed in God, but I feel much more strongly about it. Something happened. So thank you.
So, Bill, President Trump's near-death experience had a profound effect on his faith. He even signed an executive order establishing a faith office. So what do you think?
Yeah, I'm thrilled. Especially he's addressing anti-Christian bias. And anybody that keeps track of pro-life Catholics being arrested, and 78-year-old grandmothers arrested at protesting abortion, to homeschooling moms, or to parents that don't want their kids transitioned without their knowledge, that there's an attack on the Christian faith. And thankfully, Trump is addressing this, and he has acknowledged God. When you compare him to the other presidents, even in recent times, he's been the most outspoken about his Christian faith. And so I'm absolutely thrilled, and think that the good Lord is giving us some time to try to reclaim this country for the godly purpose for which it was founded.
The late Jimmy Carter, who recently passed, was a president who many people say was perhaps the best at living out his faith after the presidency. So which U.S. president expressed the most openness about their faith, aside from Donald Trump, as you mentioned, while serving in the White House?
Yeah, well, you have Teddy Roosevelt, and over again, he mentions his Christian faith, and he talks about going into church and praising Almighty God. You had, even Franklin Roosevelt passed out Gideon's New Testaments and Book of Psalms to all the soldiers in World War II, millions of them. Harry S. Truman's the one who made the National Day of Prayer an annual event. Ronald Reagan made the National Day of Prayer the first Thursday in May. You had Lincoln in his inaugural address. He said, "Intelligence, patriotism, and Christianity, and a firm reliance on him who has never yet forsaken this favored land, are still competent to adjust in the best way all our present difficulty." So you had many leaders acknowledging God and their faith. Again, George Washington, in his farewell address, said, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who would labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness." So he was having getting rid of the anti-Christian bias. He says, those people that want to get rid of religion, they're actually pulling down the pillars of our country. So it's just important for us to understand the faith that the presidents had. Washington, Garfield was a minister, James Garfield. So it's inspiring to see some of them that we don't necessarily call religious. They still made declarations of faith. In Kennedy's inaugural address, he said, "The rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God." And Truman's inaugural address in 1949, "We believe all men are created equal because we're created in the image of God." And Eisenhower had a prayer in his inaugural address, and so did George H.W. Bush. So, and Jimmy Carter, he did mention Micah 6:8. "What doth the Lord require of thee, but to walk humbly with thy God," and so forth. But so it's Lincoln, again, he's the one who put in "God we trust" on our national coin. And that's something that he also is one that had the Emancipation Proclamation. And I love Ronald Reagan. He was pro-life, and he said in the Human Life Review, he said, "Lincoln recognized that we could not survive as a free land when some men could decide that others were not fit to be free but should be slaves. Likewise, we cannot survive when some men decide that others should not live and should be abandoned to abortion." So we have pro-life Lincoln and pro-life Ronald Reagan.
Okay, historian William Federer, thank you for providing those historic insights for this President's Day. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Gary, appreciate that conversation there. And that's going to leave us with time on the pod today for one last thing.
We've got Psalm 51:10, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." A great verse for all of us in general, no matter where we're at spiritually, but especially those young people that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And listen, when you're right with God, when you're walking in alignment with God and the things he wants for our lives, there's nothing better. And the weights and the guilt and shame and all of that is kind of freed and cleared up from you, and you just can move around a lot lighter. And this verse speaks to that, with having a clean heart and a right spirit within me. All right. That's going to do it for this edition of the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back tomorrow with more. God bless. See you then.